Then the river falls again and supplies them with more wet mud. It's an ideal situation, and now they've got the insect food they need as well. In springtime, Walthamstow also puts on one of the most spectacular bird performances you're likely to see anywhere, let alone London. The stars of the show are the reservoir's great crested grebes. Beneath the pylons, and right by the bus route, they perform their weird and wonderful courtship display. It's rather like one of those jerky ritual Siamese temple dances, only the grebes do their dance in the water. Neck feathers fluffed out until they look like bottle brushes, they copy each other's movements in strict tempo. The black-headed gulls have spent all summer in nesting colonies down at the coast. Now those gulls have come back early to book their winter accommodation in the parks and along the riverside. The gulls are like rich tourists who always spend the winter abroad to escape the worst of the weather. To them, the parks are four-star hotels to which they've been coming for years. They know the other residents, and as for room service, it's superb. At this time of year, Londoners put on their drabbest winter plumage. The office workers who leave early to miss the rush hour make their nightly migration back to their roosts in the suburbs.
Home time, it's home time, it's time that we were on our way. We've done our work, we've earned our pay, it's time for going home. Rush hour, it's crush hour, by train and bus and underground. Don't stop us when we're homeward bound, it's time for us to go.
Tycoons and typists, we've told the knell of working day. Now office girls come out to play, it's time for going home.
Flight time, it's flight time, the hour before the night time. For us it's now the right time, it's time we're on our way. It's time for going home, going home.
The starlings are coming to town. They're sort of commuters in reverse. As the office workers move out of the city into their suburbs for a night's rest, or do I mean roost, the starlings pour in. This goes on right throughout the winter. They come in for warmth and shelter. While the trees have still got their leaves, many starlings find their night's lodging in the London parks, and then the parks become an absolute bedlam of twittering and chirruping. By the time they've all flown in onto the trees, it's sometimes hard to tell which are the birds and which are the leaves. Later in the season, after the leaves have gone, the birds will move away from the parks right into the concrete jungle. But we'll have a look at that in a moment. Meanwhile, about the time the first starlings arrive, another great London spectacle is taking place. The wild fowl are going home to bed. Would you believe that there are wild geese in London? The Canadian geese in St James's Park flight every night to the Serpentine. Right through the winter, they're more regular than a good many London bus services. It's hard to see why the geese bother to make such a short trip, but it may be because they feel safer roosting on the Serpentine. It's so much bigger than St James's Park Lake, where they get their daytime food. Now, back to those starlings again. As the weather gets colder, the starling invasion moves from the parks into the streets of the West End, and then the thing really begins to get dramatic. The vast cloud, whirling like some disembodied spirit in the yellow winter dusk, is made up of parties that started their journey perhaps far out into the suburbs. The starlings are real London night birds seeking the bright lights, and Leicester Square and Trafalgar Square are two of their favourite night spots where they come to get lit up. Here in Leicester Square, for instance, those bright lights may proclaim your favourite film or film star, but to the starlings, each neon-lit letter is just a good night's kip.
Winter has come to London with a full-scale raging blizzard. The snow doesn't settle. On the streets, it quickly turns to slush. But for the capital's wild citizens, London has a good deal to recommend it as a winter resort. London's wild duck are better off in the parks than they would be in the countryside during a freeze-up. In the wild, a long, cold spell makes food hard, if not impossible, for water birds to find. In London, someone will always throw them a crust. The moorhen happily clears up what the ducks have left. The park mallard enjoys the open water brought by a temporary thaw. The snow returns, and now even the gulls are desperate for food. At least in the parks, there's always the prospect of a handout. But already there are signs of a thaw coming, and the wild ducks are the first to spot better times just ahead. They write songs about the splendours of romantic Paris in the spring, but no one's ever really done justice to London when spring comes round. Many people besides Londoners claim that the city is the most varied and surprising in the world.
Way down to Kew, from Hampstead Heath to Waterloo, all London belongs to you.
Well, we haven't tried to claim that the streets and open spaces of London are actually seething with wild animals and birds, but I do hope we've shown you that wildlife inhabits the big cities as well as the fields and hedgerows and the hills and the cliffs. The birds and the beasts are in town, and they're here because it is a town, and because there are people here. So remember, London doesn't just belong to the ratepayers, it belongs to every living creature that knows how to use it.